Welcome to Two Bees in a Podcast, brought to you by the Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory at the University of Florida's Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. It is our goal to advance the understanding of honeybees and beekeeping, grow the beekeeping community, and improve the health of honeybees everywhere. In this podcast, you'll hear research updates, beekeeping management practices discussed, and advice on beekeeping from our resident experts, beekeepers, scientists, and other program guests. Join us for today's program, and thank you for listening to Two Bees in a Podcast. Welcome back to Two Bees in a Podcast. We have a really exciting episode for you today. In the very first segment, we're going to be joined by David Westervelt, who will be giving us a history of beekeeping in America, how bees got here, how long they've been here, etc. We're going to be introducing the second pest in the apiary with Dr. Bill Kern. He'll be talking about wasps. And I will be giving you my top 10 recommendations for being a good beekeeper. So thank you for joining us for today's episode of Two Bees in a Podcast. Welcome to Two Bees in a Podcast. For this segment, I'm your host, Jamie Ellis, accompanied by co-host
Cameron Jack.
Cameron Jack.
Glad to be back.
The Cameron Jack. Glad to be back. I like that. See, Ellis rhymes with nothing.
Yeah. Well, Jack is also, it was a rough name growing up.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. All right. So this is a good segment because we have with us Mr. David Westervelt. Hey, David, how's it going?
Good morning, Jamie.
So, David, you have a lot of titles. Currently, you are the chairman of the Extension and Outreach Committee for the Florida State Beekeepers Association. You are the vice president of Bees Beyond Borders. You're the chair for the American Beekeeping Federation Research Committee. You're a second-generation Florida beekeeper, and perhaps how I know you best is you're the former assistant chief of plant and apiary inspection for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So for many years, our jobs overlapped while you worked at FDACS leading the apiary inspection program, and I worked here at UF. So it's great to have you on this podcast.
Thank you, Jamie. Just call me Dave. You don't have to use all those
I
Use
think
all
I'm
the
going to
titles
have to.
every time.
I have to. So, well, David, you know, we were thinking about what to talk to you about on this podcast, and one of the issues. So for those of you who are out there in listener land, if you don't know Dave knows really like everything about beekeeping. So it's one of those things when you bring him in to interview is really you could spin the wheel to decide what you're actually going to discuss with him. But Cameron and I and Amy behind the scenes, we thought maybe we could talk with you, David, specifically about the history of beekeeping in the United States.
Well, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Bee puns. Well, as you know, we probably can't do the entire history of beekeeping in the U.S. because we're trying to segmentize this thing and keep it short. But on the other hand, there are some points that I think we want to hit with you. So we'll just start. We know that honeybees are not native to North America, or at least the currently living species of honeybees.
Correct.
Are, right? So when were honeybees first brought into North America?
Well, the first records actually show that they came in around 1622 into Virginia, Jamestown. The first colonies there were brought in.
The first colonies in the first colonies.
Correct.
Wow. I think that's pretty good.
What about St. Augustine, Florida?
That's a good question, Cameron. We know that beeswax and honey was shown on their records dating back as far as the 1565 when that colony was started. We have no records showing colonies of bees were brought into there. So
again, for the listeners, the St. Augustine is actually the oldest European city in the settlements, right?
Correct.
Because everybody gives that to Jamestown or the one that's right before Jamestown, I forget. But so, you know, the Eastern Apiculture Society met in Virginia just close to Jamestown a couple years ago, and I was a speaker there and was able to go to Jamestown, the former settlement, and they did talk about importing bees in 1622, kind of where it all began. I think that's really neat. So how do you come over on ships with bees? Like, what was that length of time, and how did you bring not you specifically, David?
I did, Jamie.
I mean, well, you know, all these titles here, you've done everything else. So how did settlers bring these things over?
They would have actually transported the skips,
Okay.
the woven skips that we see fairly often, and it's actually the international symbol for beekeeping. And sailors would have brought them over. Hopefully they had enough honey to come over.
Right.
They'd had pigs and sheep and everything else with them.
How did they contain the bees?
And they would have plugged them down just the same as, we would do transporting.
So I guess skeps are breathable because they're kind of that
Correct.
baskety material
Right.
that woven. I never thought about that.
Yep.
I wonder what percentage of them died in shipment.
I do not know that one.
Wouldn't
I'll
it
have
be
to ask
great?
somebody.
Yeah. So, you're coming over. There's bees in your boat. How long does that trip take?
3 to 6 weeks is
Oh my
what the
gosh.
average was. And they would normally stop if they were going from, like, let's say Spain through, and they would have stopped over in some of the northern parts into Canada and Newfoundland and that.
I wonder if
area.
they offloaded bees at that point, or if they just.
There is evidence that they did
Huh.
offload, but
Interesting.
they didn't survive very well.
Yeah. So they brought them down to Jamestown in 1622. They landed on shore, and then what?
They transported them out into there and allowed them to actually start pollinating and gathering honey. If you think about it, pollination was not the main reason they dropped them off. It would have been for the sugar supply.
And I wonder if they'd even made the connection at that point. If I have a skep in my backyard, my garden's going to do better.
Yeah. Being in England and European area, most of them don't worry about the pollination fact.
Because the density of honeybees are probably
Honeybees.
high enough anyway. So in the 1620s, they get into Virginia, and then from there, how did they spread?
It's always said that they spread at the same rate that the white man traveled across, or your Europeaners traveled across.
It's funny. I hear that all the time, that Native Americans had never seen honeybees, and I often heard that in the literature. I've never seen this. I don't want to spread a myth, but I'd heard in the literature that they referred to them as white man's flies because they had never seen them. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how far and how fast did they move?
Actually, the records show that they traveled. It took them roughly 200 years to get over to the West Coast, which would have been about the same time as the gold rush in that time.
Do you think that was predominantly people moving them, or do you think it was swarms?
I think a combination of the two. When you look at how fast they repopulate areas that have been annihilated by the varroa mites, they seem to go about 5 to 6 miles a year.
Yeah, that's a good point. So were colonies kept exclusively in skeps?
Yes, at that time, skeps and the log gums that we see every now and then. Actually, I have one that we use in the museum here.
Yeah, sure.
And the problem with either one of them or the long hives that they even had transporting them made it a little bit hard.
So for all of you out there listening to this podcast, a skep is one of those basket-shaped bee hives. If you think about a basket turned upside down, that's how bees were originally housed in a lot of places in Europe. And the honey was destructively sampled, right?
Correct,
The beekeeper would have had to go in through the bottom of that skep, essentially cut through the brood to get to the honey above.
Yeah.
So you mentioned log gums. Could you define for us what a log gum is?
A log gum's nothing more than where the hollow inside of a tree that the bee person, if you want to call him beekeeper, would have gone in and actually sawn the tree down or found a hollow log and then placed some sticks across it to allow them to build on.
So I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it anyway. Why did they call them gums and not just log hives?
There's two different stories behind that. In Europe, they used, when they actually managed the log gums in the forest, they would gum back over the tree in order to hide it. When you think about it here, some of the people call a stump a gum. So
what I heard is that eucalyptus trees are referred to as gums, and if you go to Australia, that's how they refer to eucalyptus trees, and so that the bees were nesting a lot in eucalyptus trees that had been introduced here, gum trees. So they were cutting out those sections of the eucalypt trees and calling them gum hives. So I guess
we don't know. We a lot of difference in stories and where they come from.
Well, so Dave, we've talked about moving as far west as California. Now, I mean, when did beekeeping really become commercialized?
When you think about it, the New Yorkers and actually started transporting bees. They would move them by ship or barge down the intercoastal into Florida. And that started in the 1880s. They actually brought them down into what is part of Daytona, not Daytona Beach. All of us know where the beach is, but the bees don't like to sit on the beach. So they went over, and Daytona, there was a family there, the Wards, and they started commercial beekeeping there, 1880, 1883.
So you're saying the 1880s, that's 260 years after the introduction to the U.S. So those earlier 260 years, they were using exclusively gums and skips, or had they migrated into using some early kind of box hives, movable frame hives?
Once Langstroth patented the Langstroth hive, removable frames, and that really helped mechanize or be able to transport bees.
When was that? Easier. When was Langstroth doing his thing?
1864, 65.
Okay, so somewhere in the 60s, he didn't create the movable frame hive. He discovered bee space and kind of made the movable frame hive what it is today. And so, but at that point, so that allowed essentially the commercialization of beekeeping.
Correct. Yeah, you really think about it. Actually, you can go further back into Egypt and stuff. They have found commercial beekeepers over there. They were in clay pots.
Yeah, sure.
But the U.S. really didn't have very many clay pots that they found. It's all been,
But the clay pot's essentially
a skep.
Yeah, it's essentially a skep or a gum hive. Yeah. But people have been keeping bees that way for thousands of years. But still, those aren't movable frame hives, so you can't inspect the hive, which is really what Langstroth and others who helped contribute to this idea of the movable frame hive, really that's their contribution to beekeeping, is the ability to go into a colony, take the frames out, and inspect those frames for diseases and pests and other maladies that you can address.
Yeah. And that was part of what our Florida Department of Agriculture started over 101 years ago, was inspecting bees. So
yeah, sure.
That's a big, important part of the industry.
So this early commercial beekeeping in the United States, I mean, is it primarily honey production? Are they moving just for honey?
At that time, it was all honey production. It was brought in, and they were actually producing citrus honey in Florida. During the time when they weren't moving honey back up to New York, they were actually transporting oranges and vegetables up. So it would take 3 to 5 days to get up from here to New York with a power barge.
So again, I try to wrap my mind around this, because in today's commercial beekeeping, it's such a pollinator-driven industry. So when was there a shift in the commercial industry from focusing maybe exclusively on honey production to providing pollination services?
Here in the United States, most of your pollination, you're going to into almonds, was started in the 40s and 50s when they first started planting almonds, but most of that was not commercial beekeepers moving out. It was provided by California. When they started doing vegetable pollination and row crops, that was in the 70s and 80s.
Interesting. But starting in the 70s, beekeepers were making money essentially renting their colonies to growers.
Your larger ones.
Gosh, that's still, sometime after 1880. It's hundreds of years still after we had the bees. Here, when did commercial queen breeding and package bee production, things like that, become a thing?
We have records of showing queen breeding started in the U.S. in the 1820s. There were queen breeders that sold queens. Some of the records show they sold queens for as high as $20 at that time, which that would have been
adjusted for inflation,
6 months. Yeah. But they were only selling 1 or 2 queens at that time, compared to now. You go into the early 1900s, 1910 in that area, that's when your package and bulk bees were sold in queens.
I was going to say, I mean, back, we're talking 1820s. I mean, this is, 30, 40 years before
Pony Express was just
before we even have Langstroth hives. I mean,
Correct.
This is
how do you rear? That's exactly what I was thinking. How do you rear queens in a hive that you can't remove combs?
That's actually, there's people that do them in top bar hives and stuff.
Sure,
You've got to use that method. We know there were they wouldn't be frames like we think of the Langstroth frames. They would have been virtually a stick across there, which they raised queens, and they did other things, combed honey, a lot of other stuff. So
if commercial queen production started in the 1820s, when did it begin to look like what it looks like today?
It's probably around the 1910, 1920s when they started using mail and to ship bees and packages. The package industry in South Georgia and into North Florida really got going in the 1914, 1920, right before World War One, and then really took off right after World War One. So,
what about specific like breeding for specific genetics and traits? I mean, we're still talking 1820s?
Not that early.
Okay.
No, it started later into that when you went into Brother Adams, and
you're right. Okay,
that's really where we started looking at genetics. Took on even later than that, but we were looking for traits.
Yeah, well, hygienic behavior and all that stuff. Rothenbuehler and others were looking at that. When was that? Was that the 60s? 60s, I forget. Yeah, but those are often in response to chalk brood and American foul brood, if I'm not mistaken. Diseases. And these days, of course, it's all Varroa centered. Right. I still think it's pretty interesting, kind of the evolution of beekeeping over these years. I think back when you keep skeps and gums, cutting out those combs of honey, that's one thing. But did they make liquid honey there, or was honey principally sold as a combed commodity?
There was actually both. When you're cutting combs and stuff, what most beekeepers did in Europe and in the U.S. at that time, they would kill off half of their bees, and the ones they were killing, they'd use different means of smoking them out to kill them, and then they would actually cut the comb and discard the brood.
Sure.
And so it's a lot different than what we have anytime you're cutting comb, or you've got some liquid honey left there. So, but a lot of it was comb.
How they get the liquid honey?
They normally extract it, squeeze it through
cheesecloth or something.
Cheesecloth, yeah.
They didn't step on it.
Not like grapes. Made some mead out of it.
Good to know. So, in the history of beekeeping in the United States, what are some of the wackiest inventions that you've seen that kind of helped address whatever the need in beekeeping was at the time?
I've seen some glass beehives, which those worked real good till the sun comes up.
Those are great in the
dark. Solar wax melter hives.
Okay.
There's been some other ones. When you get a beekeeper that thinks he needs to find something, he becomes an inventor.
Yeah, beekeepers.
And so you get a lot of interesting ideas. Probably the best one I've ever seen was styrofoam cup queen breeders. They would use a styrofoam cup, actually cut a small hole in the top for a slit in the top also for a little piece of beeswax foundation. The queen cell would be put into there, and a teacup worth of bees, and then put a piece of cardboard on the back, and
that works
3 to 5 days, and then open them up and allow them to go till the wind blows.
I was going to say the wind seems like it
blows them all over the place.
Then you come and see your entire day's work scattered around the earth. 200
baby nukes blown everywhere.
All right, I keep going back to 1622. What bees came over in those skeps?
Those at that time would have been your European honeybees. Most likely, we know we've got some of the ones coming in would have been the mellifera.
Okay.
We've got some idea. We showed the genetics that we did have Iberian.
Okay, so essentially there are, the bee we keep is Apis mellifera. It's distributed in the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. And so within Europe, there are different subspecies or races, right? So you're saying the race or subspecies that was brought over was Mellifera mellifera. So the first mellifera is the species name. The second mellifera is the subspecies name. That bee is distributed really across the northern Europe, perhaps into the British Isles, et cetera. So what are some characteristics of this bee?
It's a good pollen producer. It's a good propolis gatherer. It likes to get a little more defensive sometimes.
Yeah, that's what people are. What color is it?
It's a darker color.
Yeah, if you read the old literature, it talks about the black bee that's defensive. Some people called it the German bee, but it's not distributed exclusively to Germany. It's across really northern Europe.
And we always used to leave it the first hive in our bee yard and the last hive. That way, if somebody messed with our bees, they didn't like to mess with them.
Yeah, my kids were saying, I shouldn't even say this on the podcast, but I just bought a lawnmower, and my kids are like, to keep it from getting stolen, Dad, you need to put beehives close to it so people won't come. Well, that's a good idea, but
that would work.
But so you said Iberiensis, right? That's the Iberian Peninsular bee, right? In Europe, Spain, Portugal. Yeah. So. Well, then how did we end up not using those bees here a few hundred years later? What happened?
Those probably came in. We saw them in parts of Florida, and the genetics, when we sent them off to get them, they came back as the Iberian. And they are not as easy to manage. They don't store as much honey, it seems like. but they finally just disappeared out of Florida. So,
well, let me ask kind of a question that will maybe kind of bring this to conclusion. It's only sort of about the history of beekeeping, but we have this continent, North America, that does not have Apis mellifera.
Right.
And in 1622, European settlers bring in Apis mellifera.
Correct.
Now, we don't know with certainty, but how do you think Apis mellifera changed the landscape?
Because you think about what they're pollinating,
Mm-hmm.
Sure, apples and blueberries and all, cranberries, those are native to the U.S., which they do require pollination. So they helped hybridize
Mm-hmm.
some of the fruits and vegetables. And now that we've gotten to be growing all of our food, and 99% of it is hybridized.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they've done, except for the corn, wheat, and rice.
Sure. If it's not a grain, probably some bee has to make it possible.
Correct.
Well, David, I really appreciate you spending your time with us today talking about the history of beekeeping in the U.S. So thank you for joining us. Will you join us in the future? Because you're such a wealth of knowledge. I think we could probably open the book that is David Westervelt and talk about nearly anything.
I'll be happy to join you.
Okay. We have a strict no bee pun policy that I'm starting to implement from this time point.
All right. I'll be happy to.
All right. He'll be happy
Dave.
to oblige. All right. So that was David Westervelt, who is currently the chairman of the Extension and Outreach Committee for the Florida State Beekeepers Association, the vice president of Bees Beyond Border, the chair for the American Beekeeping Federation Research Committee, a second-generation Florida beekeeper, and former assistant chief of plant and apiary inspection for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. David, thank you for joining us on Two Bees in a Podcast to talk about history of the beekeeping in the United States.
Well, thank you, Jamie. And you forgot to add in there, I'm the only person that's attended every bee college.
UFB college, that's right. You're better than even me, David. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
For more information about this podcast, check out our website at ufhoneybee.com.
Here at Two Bees in a Podcast, we have started a discussion on apiary pests, things that bother bee colonies or beehives from the outside in. And we are joined today by Dr. Bill Kern, Associate Professor of Entomology at the Entomology and Nematology Department, based at the University of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. Hey, Bill.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Amy, you're here as well.
I am.
Guys, today's topic from apiary pests, as we continue this series of apiary pests, we're talking about yellow jackets, hornets, and paper wasps. In other words, these wasps. Bill, could you give us an overview of what these critters are, what they do, what their life cycles are, et cetera?
Okay. The yellow jackets and hornets are broadly categorized as hornets. They form large colonies.
All right.
And they make a paper nest. So they chew up wood, and they have a comb for their brood.
Yes.
And then they have a paper shell around the nest.
That's pretty cool.
Their biologies are pretty amazing. I actually have an untreated wooden rocking chair on my back porch that wasps come and chew the legs for their paper nests. And so every year while we're sitting and rocking, they'll come and start chewing the wood and carry it off. We've got all these chew marks. So biologically, these are fascinating, making paper nests, large colonies, et cetera.
And then if you compare that to the paper wasp, paper wasps generally are going to have smaller nests.
All right.
And they have paper comb.
Okay.
But they don't have that paper shell around the outside.
All right.
They tend to form smaller colonies. And that's one of the reasons why they are less of a problem.
Okay.
For beekeepers, they can be a problem because, if you have a paper wasp nest underneath your beehive and you go to work your bees, you might irritate those wasps.
So let me see if I can make some broad statements about their nesting behavior, Bill, and get it right. So paper wasps tend to not encapsulate their nest. They tend to be like under the eaves and overhangs of houses. Naturally, I find them under big palm fronds, et cetera, in Florida, like big leaves and structures like that. The hornets, what I would call like the true hornet, they tend to be the things that nest from tree limbs, right? And they will build these paper structures that look like basketballs, as it were, with a hole in it that's the entrance. Now, these are the things that in popular culture are often mistaken as honeybee nests, but honeybees do not build that structure around their nest. But hornets do. They tend to build a paper structure, go into it, and make their comb.
Those are so cool.
They're pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, yellow jackets, on the other hand, tend to nest in cavities in the ground, right? So they'll build these paper structures around them, but you don't see that because they're nesting physically in the ground.
Yeah, you'll see it if you dig up the nest.
That's right. And so you've kind of got broadly these three categories. Paper wasps that don't build this structure around their nest. They hang suspended from something. Hornets that will build this, spherical paper structure around their nest, often suspended from tree limbs. And then yellow jackets that go into ground cavities, still use paper, but you don't see it because they're physically in the ground.
Okay, wait, but my question for you is, what does this have to do with honeybees?
A lot, of course.
Tell me.
It can have a lot to do with honeybees.
All right.
One of the important things to realize, and this is true for paper wasps, hornets, and yellow jackets, is they start out as a single queen every spring.
Exactly.
So they have what's called an annual colony.
All right.
And then the numbers of the colony build up. And in the case of yellow jackets, they actually will excavate and make their hole in the ground bigger.
Their cavity, yep.
And they will enlarge their nest. So by August, September, they start to produce the reproductives. The
queens and drones.
The queens and drones
Yep.
that will produce the next generation of wasps or hornets or yellow jackets. And it's during that period of time, that late summer, early fall period, is where we really start to see problems with yellow jackets and hornets, because they're going to be desperate for protein to feed those new reproductives.
Now, are you talking about Florida specifically when you're talking about the seasons?
I'm talking about virtually any temperate part of the world.
Okay.
The tropics are a little bit different because we see different life cycles in the tropics. But in temperate regions, whether you're talking about North America or even, including Mexico, Europe, Eurasia, southern parts of Australia, the southern parts of probably South Africa as well, you have this annual production. And it's at the end of the season that's when they really start getting desperate for protein.
Think about it this way, Amy, right? So Bill is right. These colonies don't overwinter as colonies. They overwinter as a single individual queen. She comes out in early spring, like what Bill said, and she grows her nest initially. And then she starts just staying behind and laying eggs, and her offspring then continue to tick. But these things are carnivores. They raise their larvae on meat. So as that colony grows, you have this ever expanding need for more and more and more and more meat. Early in the season, spring and early summer, there's a lot of insect meat available in the environment.
I didn't realize they were carnivores. Yeah,
caterpillars, grasshoppers, things like this. But if you think about it, at the end of summer, towards the beginning of fall, the colonies are as strong as they are all year round, but their meat availability starts to decrease significantly. So they will transition from taking easy prey, caterpillars, grasshoppers, whatever they go after, to much more difficult prey.
Got it. Like
social
the
bees,
honeybee.
because it's just a resource. Think about it. Early in the year, there's so much meat available in the environment, they don't have to risk a fight to get it. But later in the year, they'll do whatever it takes to get food for that large colony, meaning even attacking a well-defended honeybee colony. And that tends to be when we see these issues, right? When yellow jackets or hornets start to really invade and cause a problem in the apiary for the beekeeper.
And you can usually tell when that's happened, because if you look at your hive, you're going to have not only, lots of dead bees with their heads cut off, but you're going to see a fair number of dead yellow jackets as well.
Okay, so you're saying that they actually rip their heads off? Is that what
they'll go in and they just bite the heads off, and you'll see the front entrance of your hive just strewn with body parts. And then occasionally you'll see dead yellow jackets, and that's how you know
they've had like a battle to the death.
Yeah, well, that's the case. So we're speaking, just listeners, just know this, we're speaking in generalities here, but in general, they'll decapitate or attack in some way to immobilize the bee. But if you think about it from inside of an adult bee, most of the quality protein is in the thorax, right? Where that's full of muscle because that's where the legs and the wings attach. But it's also in the abdomen because you've got all that juicy goodness in the abdomen. So a lot of them will decapitate bees to make it easier to take them back to their hive. But also in Asia, as an example, some of these Asian species of hornets decapitate bees to kill them so they can then go into the hive and pluck out the brood, which they then take back to their nest. And this is generally again, what yellow jackets, hornets, and maybe occasionally the paper wasp will do. So let's think specifically about some of these groups, Bill, these yellow jackets. What makes them such a large threat to honeybee colonies?
Well, the biggest problem is that they can produce very large colonies, comparable in size to a honeybee colony. And so they are very aggressive.
Yes.
Most of the year, they're feeding primarily on caterpillars. But then in the fall and late summer, they get so desperate for protein, they'll actually even go after carrion.
Yeah.
And you'll see yellow jackets on dead animals on the side of the road.
Yeah, we've lost entire research colonies and had to move apiaries here in Florida because we've had yellow jacket problems so bad. And it's not an every year thing. You know, it's every 5 or 6 years for us here at the University of Florida. We'll just have an entire apiary attacked. We'll lose colonies. They're at the nest entrance. They're fighting and killing bees. They're going right into the nest. I didn't believe it until I saw it here as well.
Sure. So what do we do to control it? Is there a way to control these?
Probably the simplest thing to do is to figure out where the colonies are, the yellow jacket colonies, and treat them.
Yeah, to kill them.
And I would normally use an insecticidal dust applied at night at the entrance, and then you let the bees or the yellow jackets actually track the poison into that underground nest. We discourage people from using materials like liquid insecticides because they just go down, run off the shell, and never get to the yellow jacket nest proper.
Yeah.
Also, we strongly encourage people not to use gasoline or diesel fuel.
Yeah.
Because just a small amount of gasoline or diesel fuel will actually contaminate an awful lot of groundwater.
And incidentally, Bill, you know, I don't usually even tell people to go deal with the nest themselves. Yeah, yellow jackets make me nervous when someone doesn't know what they're doing. So I often tell them just to contact a pest control operator to come have that eradicated. Amy, there is no substitute for finding and destroying the nest. Another thing that you can do, Bill, is you can physically move the apiary. If the bees are getting attacked enough, you can't locate the nest, move your bees. We've had to do that here before. We've also tried to keep the apiary in place, but making it very difficult for the yellow jackets to access the nest. We would reduce the entrances significantly to maybe where only one bee could come and go. We will make sure there's no cracks or crevices around the rest of the hives. We would try to limit the reasons that the yellow jackets would want to be in the apiary, but we have not stopped from moving entire apiaries if it's been a big problem.
And I've never tried using yellow jacket traps around the outside perimeter of the bee yard, but that might be a possibility too.
Sure. So Bill, I want to get into even a kind of a scarier topic. I want to talk about hornets specifically. You know, in the U.S., we have our own species of hornets. There's the bald-faced hornet, et cetera, that we have here in the Southeast. I've seen it at colonies, but not really decimate colonies. Our bigger problem is the yellow jacket. But there's a few hornet species that are moving around the world and causing significant issues for beekeepers. And so, as an example, I'm in Europe quite a bit, and there is a new species of hornet from Asia that is now in Europe. It's called Vespa. That's the genus Velutina. That's the species. And this hornet came from Asia. It does all the same things hornets do. When fall comes around, it tends to attack honeybee colonies. But in Asia, the Asian species of honeybees can handle it quite well. When it made it to Europe, the Apis mellifera really didn't have an answer for it. And so this hornet will do everything we said: hang out at the nest entrance, decapitate bees, steal brood, etc. What do you know about this hornet? You know, how big of a problem is it? Is it a risk of moving outside of Asia and Europe and even being to North America as an example?
I haven't actually ever dealt with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I have dealt with Vespa crabro, which is the European hornet.
It's a hornet native to Europe, but now is outside of Europe.
Correct. And it is now here. It actually came to North America in 1840.
Oh, we've had it for a long time then.
So, and it took, 180 years or so to reach Florida from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So it didn't spread very fast. I actually, used to see it in Indiana in the 1980s. And the one difference is instead of making that traditional paper-like nest
Sure.
that looks like a gray basketball up in the tree, they actually build their comb, that paper comb, inside a hollow tree.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, that hornet I've never seen in our colonies in the U.S. Even though we've had it, I've not seen it as a big problem. But I know in Washington State, for example, either late 2019 or early 2020, I can't remember, a second species of Asian hornet, Vespa mandarinia, has been found, and that is the Asian giant hornet. And it is similar to Vespa valentina, the Asian hornet that's in Europe. And both of these pose a significant threat to the beekeeping industry in the U.S., in my opinion, if they were to spread to areas that they can really take off. And it's going to be the same thing that we see with yellow jackets. They're going to show up at nest entrances, try to do these damage. In Europe, they are frantically scrambling to try to figure out how to control this thing. They start exactly the way you said. Find and destroy the nest. And if you can't do that, try to create barriers at the colony entrance so that the hornets can't physically get to bees. But these things are clever. A lot of these hornets will just wait right outside the barrier for the honeybees to do. And it seems like there's very little defense that the honeybees have. What's the natural defense that the Asian honeybees have against these hornet species?
Well, I know the famous one is where for Vespa japonica, when they attack Apis cerana in Japan, the Asian honeybees will actually ball up, and they vibrate their wing muscles and generate heat, and literally will cook the hornet inside this ball of bees. And that's how they're able to defend themselves, their colony, from the Japanese giant hornet.
So I don't believe everything I see or hear online, but I have seen a video. But I have seen a video of that happening, where they had the video looking at the infrared heat, and it was just unbelievable what those honeybees could do to defend their colony.
Yeah, well, behaviors like that are kind of largely absent in Apis mellifera, which is one of the issues that they have. And furthermore, these hornets, these Asian species and some other things we've talked about, their exoskeletons are just so tough. So honeybees have a difficult time stinging them to death. They're usually the smaller dog in the fight, so the hornet will usually be able to win that out every day. So, as we kind of wind down this discussion on hornets, yellow jackets, paper wasps, et cetera, you mentioned earlier for yellow jackets finding the nest. You've mentioned baits. Are baits a good, thing that you can do in general for the other hornets?
I've never seen any baits that are very effective.
Okay.
There are traps available.
Okay.
So there are yellow jacket traps that you hang up, and it has a protein-based bait matrix that lures them in. They go into the plastic bag of the trap and are trapped there. In terms of killing the colony, for some of these yellow jackets, remember that yellow jackets can sting through a bee suit.
Sure.
So
hornets too.
Multiple times.
Oh, yes. Yep. And so the idea is if you're going to wear a bee suit and you're going to go after a yellow jacket colony, put on lots of layers underneath your bee suit because it's space. The stinger of a yellow jacket is actually almost twice as long as the stinger of a honeybee.
Sure.
I'd rather just pay for a pest control operator to come and take care of that.
I think in many cases that's the best option. So couple pointers as we kind of wind down. If you can find, locate and destroy the nest, either you do it or a pest control operator, and we prefer the latter for safety reasons. Secondly, reduce access to your colony by reducing entrances, removing reasons in the apiary that the things might want to be there. For example, I see yellow jackets hovering around feeders, sugar water feeders quite a bit. Number three, if you really are having a problem, you need to consider barriers. There are these traps that you can put up, these barriers. And fourth and finally, if there's a really big issue, you might have to move your bees away from that because they can really be destroyed. The entire colonies can be destroyed in a very short period of time.
Can we say that if the colonies are strong and we're keeping them healthy, that they have a better chance of fighting them off?
I would say, Amy, they have a better chance, but it's certainly not guaranteed.
Sure.
Because, my colleagues in Europe regularly talk about how strong colonies, strong apiaries are taken out by some of these things.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible biology. These insects by themselves are fascinating, but they certainly can become a significant pest when they turn their attention to bees.
And remember that yellow jackets, hornets, even paper wasps, they're also hymenopterid, just like our honeybees.
That's
so
right.
Anything you do that can kill a yellow jacket or a hornet could potentially be killing your bees.
That's right.
So you always follow label directions on pesticides if you choose to use pesticides.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Bill Kern, Associate Professor in Entomology from the Entomology and Nematology Department at the University of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. He was joining me and Amy today as we talk about the apiary pests, yellow jackets, hornets, and paper wasps. Thank you for joining us for this segment of Two Bees in a Podcast.
Have questions or comments? Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at UF Honeybee Lab.
So we get a lot of questions on a daily basis just from beekeepers calling in or messaging us on social media and emailing us about questions that they have as far as beekeeping goes. There's so much information out there, Jamie. Do you agree? There's just a lot of information.
Yeah, we're going to do a future podcast probably on resources for beekeepers, right? Because you've got to be able to separate fact from fiction, know what's vetted, et cetera. And so you're right. There's a lot of stuff out there. So how do you know it's true?
Exactly. So, what are your recommendations? If someone were to come up to you and say, hey, what do I need to focus on? What would be your recommendations for beekeepers?
Yeah, if you read the books or the periodicals or magazines, et cetera, the blogs, you're going to kind of be overwhelmed with beekeeper information. Some years ago, I wrote a series for the American Bee Journal called Field Guide to Beekeeping. And in one of those articles I wrote, I listed kind of a top 10 priority list. And they're not prioritized within the top 10. They're just my top 10. And so, number one's not necessarily the most important thing. It's just the first thing that popped into my head. But I created a list of 10 things that I think really every beekeeper needs to focus on or know or do. And that's funny because I now write a column for the American Bee Journal. It's the Q&A session. And someone asked me, Jamie, what are your top 10 things? So it allowed me to bring back out that list from my old article series, dust it off and answer it.
Isn't that nice when you get to reuse some of the information you have?
Yeah, recycling's always good. Recycle, reduce, reuse, right?
All right. So tell me, what, in no particular order, what would you say, 10 things that beekeepers need to take into consideration or should be a priority for them getting into beekeeping?
Yeah, the first thing I put on my list is making Varroa control a priority. In my opinion, beekeepers, a lot of beekeepers just don't give this enough attention.
Sure, and that's all we talk about is Varroa.
Absolutely. We teach about it, we think about it, et cetera. But Amy, the way that I explain this is when I first started teaching people to keep bees, all we had to do was tell them to put apistan in their colonies twice a year, spring and fall. You're done with Varroa, that's fine. Then everybody got really nervous about the impacts of acaricides or Varroacides on colonies. And so for about a 15-year period, everybody was looking for the softer things. Sure. Powdered sugar, small cell, all stuff that we've
picking them off one by one.
All of the stuff that we've eventually shown doesn't really work.
Sure.
So now we're back to, I feel like we've created a generation of beekeepers who don't take Varroa seriously. So, one of the things I would tell beekeepers is make Varroa control a priority. You've got to kill the mites, otherwise they're going to impact your bees.
So you want to hear something really funny real quick?
I cannot wait.
I was eating.
You can't laugh before you say it.
I know, and I'm just thinking about it. I was eating a chia bowl breakfast bowl the other day.
I don't even know what that is.
You know what chia is?
Chia is a little shape of a thing that you spread plant seeds on and it grows.
It's a seed. It's a typhus seed.
Yeah, chia.
Yeah, have you heard of a chia pet?
Yes.
Okay.
You can eat those things?
The seeds, yeah.
You can eat a chia pet.
Gosh, yeah. No. Well, sure. Not the actual structure of what the chia is growing in. But
all right, continue your story. Chia bowl.
Well, a little chia seed fell out on the table, and I thought it was a Varroa mite on the table because that's all I think about is Varroa.
All right. Well, do you want to hear the second thing that you need to think about.
Yeah, and the third, fourth, fifth, 10th.
Yeah, so number 2, again, not necessarily second highest priority, but just the second thing on my list is experiment with resistant queen stock. It's kind of hand in hand with Varroa, but I think people should purchase and use queens that have been bred for tolerance to Varroa or some other characteristics. Most of us will just purchase a queen from any equipment or any queen producer we can find, right? But in reality, we should invest in giving tolerant queen a chance. We should purchase tolerant queen stock, Minnesota Hygienics, Russians, VSH queens from Baton Rouge, things like that. We should give them a chance.
Awesome. What about your third?
Third, you need to practice effective swarm control. You know, a lot of natural beekeepers are going to be upset with me about that statement, but frankly, bees swarm when you least need them to. The colonies try to swarm at the beginning of the major nectar flow. So when your colonies swarm, you're going to lose honey production. So if you're interested in producing honey, you've got to control swarming.
It's funny because people are always really surprised when all of a sudden a swarm happens, but we should really be prepared for that, right?
Yeah, and I don't mean this negatively, but when your colony swarms, you lose. And I just made a lot of people unhappy with that statement, but when your colony swarms, you lose honey. So practice effective swarm control. Number 4, focus on bee nutrition. And when I think about bee nutrition, so many people think that it just kind of stops with the addition of sugar water. If your bees are, quote, hungry, you feed them sugar water. But really, nutrition is really all-encompassing. Are they getting enough pollen? Are they getting a diversity of pollen? Are they getting high-quality pollen in addition to their carbohydrate needs? So focus on bee nutrition. The fifth thing is kind of like the third. You want to make sure that your colony's headed by a good quality queen. So I just said invest in good queen stock, a tolerant stock, VSH, Minnesota Hygienic, what have you. But you don't want to just invest in having a queen. You want to make sure that she's a good queen. And so many beekeepers are satisfied with just having a queen in their colony that they don't insist that she is a good quality queen, producing a lot of brood, productive colony. So I always tell people, if your colonies aren't headed by good quality queens, the welfare of your colony is suffering.
Sure. All right. You're over halfway. So that's 5.
All right. Number 6, conduct an honest assessment of the quality of forage resources in the area where your bees are located. A lot of people say that I've got bad bees or good bees, and they don't know that it has nothing to do with their bees at all. It's because they could be in a high quality forage area or a low quality forage area. So you need to recognize when your bees are in an area they can succeed. What's the pollen availability, the nectar availability? Is it available throughout the year? When do your bees have lots of incoming pollen or not so much incoming pollen? So I just said a few points ago, focus on nutrition. Well, this is kind of the outside the colony focus on nutrition. Do you have quality forage in the area?
All right, number 7.
Number 7, control the pests and pathogens that are manageable. We sometimes freak out about the things that are a struggle to control, small hive beetles as an example, or some of the viruses. But you know what? Chalk brood is controllable. American foul brood and European foul brood, they're controllable. Varroa, if you work hard enough, is controllable. So if we focus on the diseases and pests that are manageable, some of those ones that keep us up at night will be less of a problem.
Does it keep you up at night?
Lots of things keep me up at night. But
you just can't sleep because of Varroa.
Dying bees are on my mind all the time. And at the moment they're not on my mind, some beekeeper emails or calls and puts them right back on my mind.
Sure. All right, we're going towards the home stretch.
That's right. Number 8, spend time researching the latest information related to beekeeping. And incidentally, number 9 is kind of like it. Join and actively participate in the local, regional, and state beekeepers association. So let's back up to number 8. Beekeepers should not be ignorant beekeepers. And I don't mean ignorant in the negative sense. I mean ignorant that you're just not aware of the newest things, the newest diseases, the newest pests, the newest trends in nutrition research, the newest information related to new pests that have been found on our shores, or quality queens, or new management strategies, or hive topics. We can't just grab our bees and go and run and hive. Go and hive. Freudian slip. We need to be aware of the newest trends. That's number 8. So we should be constantly reading, constantly research, constantly aware, which then lends itself to that number 9. We should join and actively participate in local, regional, and state or even national beekeeping associations. One of the best ways to stay up to date on bees, bee science, beekeeping in general, is to surround yourself with other beekeepers, both, not just both, but on the local scale, on the regional scale, on the state scale, and to a larger extent, if you're able, on the national or international scale. So surround yourself with beekeepers. That's a great way to stay up to date on information.
And that's really part of our job too, is right?
Absolutely.
Sharing that and being able to communicate that information as stuff starts coming out, and recycling some of that information too, just as a reminder for people.
Absolutely.
Okay, number 10.
Number 10, don't forget the small things that matter. So this is kind of the catch-all category, right? For example, have you rotated your combs out of your hives in the past 10 years? Do your bees have an adequate water source nearby their hive?
Sure.
Right? Do you believe your bees are being exposed to pesticides? Do you live in an area where bears are present? So in other words, these things that many of us consider kind of minor, are they things that can creep in and cause a problem for your bees and beekeeping? So let me go over that list again and just promise our listeners that we're going to have podcast episodes on each of these. But just to say them again, make Varroa control a priority, experiment with resistant queen stocks, practice effective swarm control, focus on bee nutrition, ensure that your colony is headed by a good quality queen, conduct an honest assessment of the quality of forage resources in the area where your bees are located, control the pests and pathogens that are actually manageable, spend time researching the latest information related to beekeeping, join and actively participate in local, regional, and state or national beekeeper associations, and finally, don't forget the small things that matter. What do you think about that, Amy?
I think that's great. And you know what? I really like that they go in line with the BIP, the Bee Informed Partnership.
Absolutely.
The top, stressors of honeybees.
That's right.
So
If you do these things, I think you'll have a good chance of being a successful beekeeper who is fortunate to keep healthy colonies.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
It's everybody's favorite game show, Stump the Chump.
It is that question and answer time. Jamie, I've got some questions for you from the audience.
And I'm going to do my best to have some answers for you from my brain.
Awesome. And it's kind of funny because I've been getting from your brain.
Well, you said you have questions from the audience. Where do I get answers?
Your brain.
Of course. You'll figure me out someday, Amy.
Maybe. My first question is from JK, who's actually an extension agent
Is that
in Orange
just
County.
kidding?
JK.
JK. Oh, yeah. I'm with you.
I don't know what that stands for. We'll have to figure out what. Anyway, his question is, can you smoke bees too much?
JK, thanks for the question. So in theory, you can smoke bees too much, right? And so what I like to do is I have my smoker going and it's sitting beside me on the ground. And when I am working my colony and my bees increase their agitation, which is evidenced by them popping me on my veil or flying, chasing my hand, then I'll smoke them lightly until that's subdued. The moment that happens to me again, I'll re-smoke. Now, in a very defensive colony, that might be, every 30 seconds. But I don't sit there and puff and puff and puff and puff and puff and puff and puff. I mean, again, in theory, you can smoke them too much. And if that happens, they'll abscond. But I have never caused a problem by over smoking colonies.
What about with honey harvesting?
So it can be an issue with honey harvesting because if you over smoke them, then the honey can take on the taste of that smoke. The same is true for wax. So really what beekeepers need to learn is they need to learn how to smoke, before they go into the colony. They'll lightly smoke the nest entrance. They'll smoke under the lid and they'll smoke as they remove supers, but that's it. Then they need to learn how to smoke in response to the bees. What are the bees showing them that would require them to puff? And when they do puff, it's just light puffs over the top. With regard to the honey super specifically, if you are doing what I just said to keep the bees' defenses down, then you won't be causing a problem for your honey supers. I have worked super hot colonies, right? Colonies that are very defensive. And those I've almost had to smoke the entire time I was working. But the colony reset afterwards and it wasn't a problem for them.
I did that last week and I got stung in the face.
Well, clearly you weren't smoking them well enough.
Okay.
Or wearing your veil, Amy. That's a policy.
I was wearing my veil. I was. Got through. Okay. So we have 2 questions from Russ, who I will admit was one of my previous master gardeners in Orange County.
Hello, Russ.
He went to a class with JK, and then he asked me questions on the side. So I'm going to ask two of the questions that he has. So the first one is, how does the hive keep a balance between drones and workers?
So that is completely driven by workers. So the queen will be laying, eggs, fertilized or unfertilized, making females or males. And when it's drone production season, which is usually comes in late winter, early spring, the workers will carry those unfertilized drone eggs through to adult maturity. When it's not good to have drones around, in other words, when reproduction season is over, they will abort those eggs if the queen lays them. So the workers are the ones who decide, if they're going to allow drones, or even for that matter, workers, to develop. And they do that by removing eggs or prohibiting queens from laying.
That's pretty awesome. So can the queen lay different kinds of eggs? That's a third question.
I mean, this obviously is a very natural, good extension from the previous question. The queens can, in fact, lay different types of eggs. A lot of people think that they can lay queen eggs and worker eggs and drone eggs. They can't. What they can lay are female eggs and male eggs. So a female egg is one that they allowed to be fertilized, and a male egg is one that is unfertilized. So male eggs, these unfertilized eggs, become drones. The female eggs become either queens or workers. That is not at the discretion of the queen. That decision is made by the workers. So the workers will take a female larva and either feed it a lot of high quality food to make a queen, or less low quality food, which makes it a worker. So queens can control the sex, workers can control the number of individuals produced and the type of individual produced.
That's pretty amazing. We always talk about how the queen is really not the one making all the decisions in the hive, right?
Yeah, her decisions are pretty simple. Should I lay an egg or not? Should it be fertilized or not? And that's pretty as complicated as the queen's life gets.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that's our Q&A for today.
Hey, keep those questions rolling. We love to hear from you on our social media accounts or via email or any way that you want to reach us. We'll look at your questions and do our best to answer them here on Two Bees in a Podcast.
We'd like to give an extra special thank you to the following: to our editors, Shelby Howell and Bailey Carroll, and to our audio engineer, James Weaver. Without their hard work, Two Bees in a Podcast would not be possible. So thank you.
For more information and additional resources for today's episode, don't forget to visit the UF IFAS Honeybee Research and Extension Laboratory's website, ufhoneybee.com. Do you have questions you want answered on air? If so, email them to honeybee@ifas.ufl.edu or message us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at UF Honeybee Lab. While there, don't forget to follow us. Thank you for listening to Two Bees in a Podcast.